Good morning. Thank you so much for watching this video. Today we're going to present our research project, which is carbon emissions due to tourism industry. So let's meet our team. Our team is composed by Ashta, Himanshi, Pankuri, Maria, Aditya, Parth, and Ganesh. So the agenda for today, we're going to start with an introduction. Then we're going to have the methodology, data analysis, and we're going to end with some recommendations. So welcome to our research project. This is tourism project. So the tourism is a significant global industry which is having a considerable impact on the environment. This industry is contributing with around 8% of the world's carbon emissions. And the majority of these emissions are caused because of energy used in hotels and transportation, especially air travel, and the depletion of ecosystem and natural resources. The rapid growth of tourism in various regions has also resulted in the degradation of natural resources and ecosystems caused by various factors such as increased air travel, greater energy consumption, increase of use of transportation services, and the construction of new tourist infrastructure. So here we have a quote which says, "Small acts, when multiplied by millions of people, can transform the world," by Howard, saying that this is something we should try to do, right? Now we can move forward to our objectives. So our objectives for this research are, the first one is to find the major contributors causing carbon emissions. The second one is to determine the effective ways that can reduce carbon emissions. The third one is to assess the effect of shared accommodation on carbon footprint on the tourism industry. The fourth one is to identify the strategy and study their effects on educating the people regarding the adverse effect on an increase in carbon emission. The fifth one is to identify the resources, local transportation, and accommodation in travel destinations. And the sixth one is to identify the factors leading ultimately to customer satisfaction. So now we're going to move forward with literature review by Himanshi.
So, talking about the literature review, we had 2 articles relating designing environmental friendly tourism services. So the first one is designing for more environmentally friendly tourism. So it emphasizes the need for more proactive approach to designing for environmental sustainability in tourism. So it suggests that the tourism sector can create brand-owned touchpoints to encourage customers to adopt more ecologically responsible behaviors. The second one is green innovation in tourism services. So this discusses the concept of green innovation in tourism services and its potential to promote economic expansion while preserving the natural resources, highlighting various approaches taken by the countries to encourage innovativeness in improving environmental performance and sustainability in tourism businesses and organizations. Talking about the theoretical review, there is a need for tourism industry to become more environmental conscious. So as it ranks among the industries with the higher carbon footprints. So the low carbon tourism aims to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by promoting sustainable practices such as green transportation, shared accommodation, ecotourism, education, and awareness and support from the local communities. So these practices can reduce carbon emissions and preserve the natural resources and biodiversity, foster sustainable economic development, and minimize negative impacts on the environment and local communities. The successful implementation of these approaches can require a collaboration and coordination among the stakeholders, which includes businesses, government, and the tourists. So the model and the research question are based on these constraints, which are green transportation, shared accommodation, ecotourism, education and awareness, support from locals. Combination of these, we have created the research question, and we have made a survey for it, and which help in the reduction in carbon footprint due to the tourism industry. So further, thank you.
Talking about the methodology, our research objective was comprehensive analysis of the global tourism industry in the carbon emission. And the scope of the study was significant tourist destinations. The data was used from the survey that we collected from our own class. And we identified the sources of carbon emissions like in the hotels, and how people like when they go and they exploit the environment when they visit the hotels, explored the drivers of carbon emission, tourist behavior, technological advancements, and policy initiatives. Outcomes of the research were the insights so that the policymakers and the government take that action into account so that they can reduce this carbon emission that is happening just because of the tourism industry. Next slide, please. So for the data collection method, we used our Microsoft Forms, and our target respondents were the B412 class group. And basically the people who have traveled, or are seeking to travel. The survey objective was to collect data on tourist points of view on eco-friendly tourism. Survey topics were tourism, awareness of carbon emissions and environmental impact in the tourism industry, and we'll be sharing a link of our survey too. And rigorous and thoughtful data collection and analysis methods were employed in this research project. Now proceeding for the data cleaning. Data cleaning was the critical step that was taken to eliminate the inconsistencies, errors, and missing values in the data. The aim was to ensure accuracy and the reliability of the data for the analysis. Process were thoroughly reviewing and removing outliers, correcting errors, and filling in the missing values. Importance was to prevent biases from attracting or affecting the analysis. The tool was used, I told you about that, it was the Microsoft Excel for this, and the actions were taken: deleting the columns with missing data, removing redundant data, and canceling repetitions. Further moving to the data analysis. So we did our statistical analysis, regression analysis. Analytical tools were used for data collection, and there were ethical considerations that were taken into account, that the Microsoft Forms or the Google Forms, which is taking the data from the user, that's not leaking, or it is taking care of their privacy. So these actions were taken into account. Now further, my colleague Parth will put a light on the data analysis.
All right. Thank you, Asta, for explaining the data cleaning part and the analysis part. And I'll just continue with the descriptive analysis. So we conducted descriptive analysis on the basis of the 4 variables, which were age, ethnicity, gender, and also frequency of travel. So I'll show you the next slide, where we came out with some results which were really surprising, that we saw that the age between 25 to 34 was the highest amount of the voters we had for our survey forms. Also, the ethnicity, we see that the Asians were on top, following with Hispanic origins and whites, and then going ahead to like Black and Middle East, at the Black, Middle East, and white at the same level of voting. And the third one we saw about gender. We saw that males were the dominant of more than the female here in terms of voting. And also the frequency of travel. We see that we have x-axis as the for like number of times traveled in a year, and the y-axis showing as the percentage of travel. So in that comparison, we see that people are more often traveling 1 to 3 times rather than traveling 4 to 6 times in a year, which was a noticeable thing in the visualization. And now I'll move ahead to the next slide.
Talking about the model, we have created a smart PLS and use these factors which are ecotourism, education and awareness, green transportation and shared accommodation for creating the model. And to us, we got the result of R and R square regression to see is the model fit, the model which we are targeting to is fit to the our observation or not. Next slide. Talking about the R&R square, we could see that ecotourism and green transportation, as per the number, have a moderate effect. However, education and awareness and shared accommodation have really less effect. And talking about the next slide, path coefficient. We could see path coefficient are key output of SEM using smart PLS as they provide insight into the strength and direction of the model. A positive p-value and the path coefficient suggest that there is a significant positive relationship between the two variables in the factors, which means our model is moderate to good fit. And then moving to next. Talking about the construct reliability and validity, I could see that construct reliability validity are measured using structure equation modeling to assess the quality of the measures model. And construct reliability, it talk about the extent to which item within a construct or measuring the data are high. High value indicate that higher internal consistency, which is desirable. And in talking about our overall model, we could see that the model has a good fit as it indicated by the positive F square value. The consistent reliability and validity also assisted using the measures, and which is also showing that the model is good fit, and R used are equal goodness to fitness fit model. So which shows that the model and the factors which we are taken are good for our analysis. Next slide.
So I'm gonna be talking about the qualitative analysis of this research. So we did 3 types of qualitative analysis. We did 3 different types of analysis, which is word cloud analysis, polarity and subjectivity analysis, and also polarity sentiment analysis. So talking about the word cloud analysis, we ran the word cloud analysis using Python, analyzed the responses to find out the most frequently used words by the respondents. The most frequent words were environment, carbon footprint, sustainability, education, local business, and much more. So from these words like S, environment, and carbon footprint indicate that we got more positive responses from our respondents. All of these words are relevant because they are important topics of discussion when it comes to reducing carbon emissions in the tourism industry. And moving on to polarity and subjectivity analysis. So polarity and subjectivity statistics suggest that subjective opinions expressed in the paper have a moderate level of subjectivity. They have a mean subjectivity score of 0.438. And this indicates that opinions expressed in the paper are not extremely polarized, but they have some degree of variability. The analysis also shows that the polarity scores have a mean of 0.180. So this suggests that the sentiment expressed in the paper is generally positive with the tendency towards a positive polarity score. And subjectivity, talking about the subjectivity analysis, so it was a mix of opinions and facts, but the majority were opinions, like 39 were opinions and only 6 were about facts. So this analysis shows that majority of people express their opinion about carbon emissions, effectiveness of certain strategies, potential benefits and drawbacks. And some of the facts includes the data, statistics and research findings of, say, for example, current levels of carbon emission, environmental impacts and of tourism, and economic costs and benefits. And moving on to the polarity sentiment analysis part. So this suggests that majority of opinions expressed in text, in qualitative analysis, are positive towards the questions about ecotourism, green transportation, education awareness, shared accommodation, and support from local communities. So out of this, there were 30 positive responses out of 45. And there were only 10 neutral responses and 5 negative responses. And so we can see that there is a relatively high number of positive responses compared to other responses. And moving on to the recommendation part, and it will be explained by Aditya.
Thank you, Ganesh. Moving on to the recommendations. So we have 6 recommendations over the different variables. First of all, in the ecotourism, we can have sustainable practices, we can have carbon offset programs, and then we can have ecotourism certification. So these are certain campaigns which we can do. We can provide ecotourism certification to the different airlines, to the different hotels. Then the other did the shared accommodation. In the accommodation part, we can encourage the accommodation capacity to be shared by the individuals. Then we can make sure that the accommodations are energy efficient, and the the accommodation that are in the tourism industry have resource conservation like rainwater harvesting, etc. In terms of the green transportation, we can always encourage the use of the public transportation instead of the taxis. And people can also opt to do cycling, walking. And electric vehicles are a good way to reduce the carbon emission. Carpooling is also one of the effective way, which is really getting popular in the younger generation, and it can help in the reducing the carbon emissions. In terms of education and awareness, our research, we find out that the promoting the sustainable travel, raising awareness, encouraging people to use the energy efficient practices and promoting the sustainable tourism plays a big role, because most of the time people have the intent but they don't know what to do. So the education and awareness plays a really big role. Next is supporting the local communities, local sourcing, community-based tourism, partnering with local communities, supporting conservation efforts. So every place, the local communities are trying to conserve the environment by reducing the carbon effects, and we can support the local communities by contributing with them, by collaborating with them, try to bind the local produce, and this all will have a great effect in reducing the carbon emission. So apart from our research variable, we have some other recommendation as well, like sustainable accommodation, virtual reality tours. This can reduce the need of travel, sustainable food and beverages, because food and beverages packaging contribute a lot to the carbon emissions, and then circular economy. Next slide. However, during our research, we had certain limitation. First of all, the limited data availability. When we searched the web, we didn't find the data for this research, so we had to stick to our B412 batch for the data. Second was the sample size and the representativeness. The sample size was really small for this research because it was limited to 40 to 50 students of our class. And the complexity of the tourism industry. Tourism industry in itself is a very complex industry because it involves traveling related to work, related to leisure. So combining all those factors and putting them in the same research was the challenge. And there was a lack of comparative data. Since tourism industry is an industry which cannot be compared to any other industry, and the data we collected was very exclusive, there was a challenge to compare the data with any studies that have been done in the past. Next slide, please. Recommendations for the future research, like we can always work on the data collection and reporting, like provided we have more time, we can collect surveys from the people, we can connect with the people from the tourism industry, do one-on-one interviews to collect the more reliable data. Larger and more representative samples, again, we can conduct reviews or surveys with the larger amount of audience, so that we have our sample size is bigger, and which will further increase the reliability and validity of our research. Collaboration and knowledge sharing, we can always collaborate with the tourism industry partners and see where their head is regarding the carbon emission reduction. And then we can always research on the tourism organizations, what steps they are taking, so that we can do a more in-depth research and our research can be aligned with their initiatives. That's everything. Thank you so much for listening to this presentation. That was Group 3.